All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's just about to be 2 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get this started. Um, Today is our second of our 7 virtual capacity building workshops that we're putting on. Today's workshop will be on fundraising presented by Kevin Jamison. Because today's workshop is set up as a webinar, please submit any questions you have into the chat. We'll get to as many of your questions during and at the end of today's workshop. So Kevin Jamison served for 20 years as an intelligence officer in the United States Marine Corps and has over a decade of fundraising experience. He has started a nonprofit that battles veteran homelessness, developed corporate relations efforts for the Veterans of Foreign Wars Foundation, and developed a foundation for the largest credit union in Oklahoma. So, without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Kevin and share his PowerPoint.
Thanks, Nick. Hello, everybody. I appreciate you attending today. If you're coming on here thinking that I'm going to teach you how to fundraise for your nonprofit forever and survive forever, that is not the purpose of this class. I'm not really going to present anything revolutionary. I'm going to give you a down-to-earth nuts and bolts of how I would attack a fundraising for an event. Specifically, I chose a Voices and Votes event. And as a person working in nonprofits, fundraising. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I put my email address in the chat. The session will run about 45, 50 minutes. If we don't have enough time for the Q&A, please go ahead and feel free to send me an email. I'll be happy to answer it. Next slide, please. So I'm excited to teach you this class because fundraising gives you a reason to get in your communities. It gives you a reason to engage sponsors. It gives you a reason to engage donors. And it gives you a reason to be active. And I love that. So the approach I took to this class was, first, I'm going to talk about planning questions to ask your leadership. If you're a leader, these are planning questions you should be asking yourself. And then we're going to develop a fundraising plan by developing a communications plan, a community engagement plan, and a sponsorship package. And then we're going to talk about things to do during event preparation, things to do on the day of the event, and then finally a follow-up. So planning questions to ask your organization for the exhibit is what we're going to talk about next. Next slide, please. It's important because understand what you are fundraising for, and then what are your fundraising goals for this event? Are you fundraising strictly to put the event on, or is your fundraising goal to use the event to generally fundraise for your organization? This class kind of addresses all of that. And so what I did was I pulled out some slides from the Voices and Voice slide deck. Next slide, please. So I'm looking right now at the exhibition summary. Next slide. And in this slide, it answers a lot of questions about what is Voices and Votes. So when I'm looking at the slide, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for places to put signs. And as you can see, it will be a challenge to put a sign on the floor to have it standing up because there's so much information at eye and chest level on this. Next slide, please. And then you get a floor plan. So the floor plan there, when I'm looking at this, I look at how people are going to flow through the exhibit. And I would also be looking at places that I could put signage that people would see, that for anybody that sponsored the exhibit, a place where I could put a sign that people could see it. Next slide. I love this slide because it showed what it looks like when people walk in. And when I see two people standing there, I see opportunity. Is there someone in my community that we would place there? Would it simply be somebody from my nonprofit? Would a sponsor want to stand there and greet people as they come in wearing their shirt? So that's kind of a little subtle logo placement opportunity for you. Next slide, please. These statistics for the event, these really spoke to me. This information is going to speak to your sponsors. When I see things like 61% of the, hold on, I'm having trouble seeing that. It's not big enough on my screen here. When I see 61% of the voices of those visitors reported that they patronized another business in town, that right there is information that's going to speak to your sponsors. So you want to take a look at all of that data and to get a feel for who's going to speak to you. But these are statistics for the event that will speak to your sponsor. Next slide, please. These are some more statistics that you can use to speak to donors as well. Next slide, please. Your donors and volunteers all want to be part of something successful, and these are statistics that show you that hosting this event is successful. And next slide, please. They include some quotes in here. This is the kind of information that I would use in sponsorship package and communication materials to try to get sponsors, donors, and attendance. Next slide, please. So the who slide, the who questions are really important. Who is hosting the exhibit? Who are your regular spot supporters and who would support this? Who are the likely attendees? Answering these questions help you communicate for your fundraising and execute a fundraising plan. Your supporters, who are they? That when you're asking your leadership, that tells you who you're looking for, who you're targeting already. When you look at who are the likely attendees, the question that you're going to answer from that is who's going to want to market to those attendees, because those are the companies that you should be hitting up for sponsorships. Would there be government officials that would be able to engage and support this in advocacy? One of the quotes up there I saw was about that people that engaged with the exhibit were more likely to vote. So that would be a reason for government officials to support and help promote your event as well. But the thing you want to ask are who would be key partners and who would be this exhibit to be important to you in your community. Next slide, please. Where is this happening? The where questions are fun because the where, if the exhibit is at another location that is not your organization's location, maybe you could get that location to sponsor, or maybe you can get it because of that location, you could get another company to sponsor. If where's the parking for the event? Can you get the parking sponsored? Where are places to sit and rest? At the VFW, when I worked there, one of the biggest places that we used to get sponsored was the sit and rest, because people would be sitting there and resting, and sponsors would want to put things there for them to access because it was marketing engagement. You want to look for where people will flow into the exhibit. But if you get a chance to go on site and look, go on site and look and walk through and make notes of where you could put signage, where you have to put it on stands, or where you have to hang it from the ceiling. Can you put stickers on windows? Can you put a sign at the top of an escalator or by an elevator? Those are all questions that you can ask yourself. But what you're doing when you do that is you're creating opportunities. You're creating opportunity for an organization to sponsor and partner and place their logo. And you're creating a financial opportunity for your organization by creating that relationship that financially supports the exhibit in your organization. Next slide, please. When is it happening? This is important, and I've got a great story for this one. The reason why you want to ask when it's happening is basically you want to deconflict. You want to see if there are other events that are happening at the same time. You want to see what the weather is supposed to be for the event. I imagine if it's far out, you won't be able to, but you need to understand that weather will impact your event. And then what is the bad weather plan? Is there going to be a backup date? All those items need to be discussed, and you need to be aware, and I'll tell you why. I was working with an organization that was having an event on Flag Day. And it was a veteran organization. And they were using this event. The reason why it's important is because they were using this event to announce a $1 million matching fundraising campaign. They had this event, they didn't deconflict and look at what other events were happening. There were 3 other events, and one was basically a 20 or 10-year anniversary for a homeless veteran service in Kansas City, and that pulled all the VIPs to it. Not only that, construction, there's Missouri State Parks was doing construction at the site. Parking was horrible. It was a nightmare. And basically, they had about 5 attendees, and it was just very disappointing. And all of it was because of the choice of the date, and that they didn't look and see that there was construction that was going to impact the site. So when is important to understand this one. Next slide, please. So why are you hosting an event? And I think the why is a conversation you should have with your executives. And if you are an executive in a nonprofit, these are questions you should be asking yourself. These get you going in the right direction. Why is the organization hosting the event? You're going to need to know that because you're going to be developing communications for social media, for press releases, for the media as well. So why is the organization hosting the event? You need to know that. Why is it important to your org? Why is it important for companies? Yes, the slides will be available after today's meeting. Nick will make sure he gets this. I think why is it important for the local government to support it? If you're doing something that's government related, you should really go talk to your executives about how you should navigate that, because it's probably going to be for them to do on the community engagement side. Let's see. Next slide, Nick. How, and for me, this is really where this presentation really kicks off. And this is probably going to be where you're going to start to get new things. I'm going to be showing you some new things, hopefully. How can you leverage this event to raise money? I've seen one of the things that we used to do at the VFW for our sponsors is we would have sponsor receptions. And on these receptions, what we would do is we just have a nice little cocktail hour to thank everyone. And you would not believe what that turned into. So we did that the first year I started working there for our corporate relations team. After that, we used that sponsored reception to basically start our baseline of fundraising for the year, because what we found out were people that weren't sponsors started coming to it, and we started inviting all these companies in the area to it. And through this reception, we were able to meet people, network, and follow up and bring more money into the organizations and creating more sponsorships. How can you have events to support this event? I've seen people have corporate receptions. I've also seen community receptions to announce that they are going to have the event and create corporate interest. I'm going to talk about some other ways how, when we get into some developing our fundraising materials in a few slides, but how can you make the event more attractive to your donors? And a lot of the time, initially, your how is going to be through the presentation of your materials and the refinement of your message. You'll learn how, if you do it the first time, you're going to learn lessons every time, because you're going to be talking to your donors, you're going to be talking to your sponsors, and you're going to be asking them, what can I do differently? But this event is your exposure and your chance to create exposure in the community. This event, the one thing I always, that was always challenging for me, fundraising in nonprofits, was just going to just generally ask for money. It's hard for me. I always liked having a reason, and an event is a reason. And learning how you can do that, how you can use an event and to create conversations with organizations that you can partner with in your community is fantastic. And the other thing that I wanted to remind you is, don't forget about digital on these as well. Next slide. So using the event to engage is one of the things that I've done in the past successfully. Is definitely planned receptions. I've also done theme-related promotions. I worked with Untuck It, the shirt company, and Chase Elliott, the NASCAR driver. And what we did was we had they basically, Untuck It created a shirt for Chase Elliott, and they wanted to use proceeds from the sales to support veterans. And so they wanted to make a donation to VFW. And I flew out there and I did whatever they asked me to do. But they did this theme related promotion, and I found myself doing everything from greeting people in the line at a NASCAR race, and I know nothing about NASCAR, to help carrying parts of cars up there for Chase Elliott to sign them. So, but the whole thing was a theme related promotion to raise money around a larger event, is what I was getting to. One of the things that we used to do in the VFW, I've seen art showings have been used to generate excitement about a future event coming up. The other thing is I have up here, when I say the possible local event or engagement of schools, business, or other organization in the community, I look at what the event's about. The voices of both. I see that really as a message for government, messaging for veterans, because most veterans care about the very patriotic, and voting is a very patriotic act. And schools, because we love to teach our kids about government. So education, veterans, and government gives you a lot of this event, gives you a reason to have conversations with these different groups that you may not normally engage and have conversations with. And that's why I love doing events. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to take a drink for a second. I'm going to talk to you about what I created. I called it a marketing plan or a strategy, for lack of a better term. We're going to talk about creating a communications plan and a strategy, for lack of a better term. Same thing with community engagement. And then we're going to talk about your sponsorship package. And all of those things combined together form what I call a fundraising plan. And so we're going to go to the next slide. So the first thing you want to do when you're creating a marketing and communications plan is list all of your marketing channels and your communication channels, from social media to your website, press releases, local media engagement, whether that's radio, TV, however you do it, emails, texts, papers, radio. List all your channels and how you want to communicate, even your social media channels. But the other thing that you should know, if you don't know it now, you should understand your channels and their effectiveness. And what I mean by that is, when is the best time to post on social media? What gets the most interactions? What gets the most likes? What gets the most shares? We used to, at the VFW, we valued shares and interactions more than anything. With your website, what are your analytics for your website? Where is the best placement for information onto your website that people see it the most? Can you integrate an email into your normal communications plan? What is your open rate for your emails? Understanding your communications channels and the best time to communicate is the first step of developing a marketing and communications plan. The next step is list all of your channels, and then you start working on your messaging. And the messaging that you want to work on is, you want to, like, your introduction, your announcement messaging for the event. And then you want to include like a link where sponsors can go to get more information, the person's name in there to do that for the press release. Basically, you want to put all your information that you want to message on there and create it you also want to start gathering, if you've got any information of statistics for it or photos from other exhibits or where it's been used, any kind of imagery that you can use for your social media or your website or all of your communication. And what you want to do is basically lay out your messaging for announcing the event, lay out your messaging for creating excitement and keeping people up to date on the event. And then you want to plan the best time to send those messages on those message channels. And those times are key because you want to get the most interaction from your communications. You can do, like, one of my favorite things to do, we would do a sponsors call post. Hey, calling sponsors for this event. So we announce the event, generate the excitement, we have our leaders engage, and then we do, hey, sponsorship call. And then we do a post about that. And what from people would reach out to us about sponsoring, or we'd have to start cold calling and reaching out to sponsors. And I'll talk about that. But what you're doing basically, go to the next slide, Nick, please. I have jumped way ahead of you. I apologize for everybody if you were writing furiously. I'm going to give you a second to look at this slide. Is basically it's listing your channels, listing your messages, and planning the best time to send those messages. And you've just developed a communications plan. A very basic strategy for funding. One of the steps on this slide right here that I talk about is that one of the things that I would do is go through and make sure that I put the event on the public calendars that we list our information on. I've listed stuff on like state park calendars and things like that. Wherever it's appropriate to list your event on your community calendars to reach the audience you want to, please do that. Another thing that I didn't talk about were flyers and posters. I would go ahead and put flyers and posters in my communications plan. And what I would do is just list the locations where I wanted to put the flyers and posters. And I'll talk more about what locations you want to put flyers and posters in just a second. Next slide, please. So we finalized our communication plan, and now you want to make sure that you integrate this communication plan and make sure it doesn't conflict with your normal communications plan. Because the last thing you want to do is have two different, nothing looks worse for an organization than when it looks like the left arm isn't talking to the right arm. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about community engagement planning. For community engagement planning, when I start out, I do priority 1, I target sponsors. Priority 2, I target donors. And then priority 3, I would target attendance, because they all are important and they all work together. So when we look at priority 1, sponsors, what I would do is I would first start with who are the organizations that always sponsor my organization's events. That's your low hanging fruit. And those are the people that you're going to go to try to get to sponsor first. So I would list those organizations. The next list I would make is a list of companies that my organization wanted to work with or wanted to partner with, but never have been able to break into, because that would be a higher priority for your organization. And then finally, I would list companies by their size in your community. Who employs the most people, or who has the biggest annual revenue. And list them by the size and list them in the priority order that you would like to go after them. The next thing I would do is start planning when I was going to reach out to them and how. And I'll talk about that in a minute. I talk about reaching out to companies very specifically in a few slides. But You want to really think about when you're going to start reaching out to them and what methods. And I'll talk about some different methods to do that in a minute. The next thing you want to do is for community engagement. Let's say how do you create excitement in the community, but also connect with donors? The way that you do that is you and your executives need to get in the community and get in front of the biggest groups you can, especially if you're in a rural community. I found that some of the best places to speak, to tell about events in rural communities are definitely the chambers of commerce and the churches, especially here in Oklahoma where the churches are heavily attended, very big. But if you can get information in schools is a little tricky and hard, but basically I would list major groups and organizations that I want to try to reach out to and list them in priority order. I would sit down with my leaders in my nonprofit and talk about the government leaders that we would like to engage. And I recommend that when you engage government officials, it's more utilize them to help create excitement for what you're doing. Utilize them to help connect you to people in the community that would want to support something like this. And then finally, don't forget that a lot of the big companies, if you have big companies in your city, a lot of those companies have employee resource groups. I worked at Teeper Federal Credit Union. They had a Hispanic employee resource group. They had the veteran employee resource group. So those resource groups can be sources of information, but also a way to connect with the company. Because the veteran resource group would bring what our veteran resource group would do, they would find charities and things that they wanted to support and bring them to the organization and do a fundraiser for. So I highly recommend that you engage them. So when you got a list, so you made a list of businesses, you've got a list of other organizations that you want to engage to support this event. Separate them by sponsors, donors, and then attendees. Prioritize your sponsors first because sponsors can be a negotiation process and it take time. Okay. And as you engage those individuals and groups, ask for the support and ask your leaders to do the same thing. And your leaders should be on the same page. And I've kind of treated this like the development person isn't one of the senior people in the nonprofit. So I apologize. I don't mean to insult anyone. But in the end of this, what you want to have is your list of target organizations in priority order. You're going to list when you want to reach out to them and how you're going to reach out to them. And I always suggest that when you do the community engagement planning, don't do it by yourself. Get as many people in that room to brainstorm with you because you'd be amazed, one, at the ideas you'll generate, but two, I'm always amazed when I include other people in my nonprofit planning. I've always been amazed at how many people other people know and who they're connected to and what kind of stuff it leads to. But when you've done all that, basically what you've done is you've created a community engagement plan, a plan to go out and engage organizations directly to support this event. Next slide, please. The next thing that you need to create is a sponsorship package. And this does not have to be a big, the one I'm going to show you, the example I'm going to show you is big and robust. But the bottom line is if you've kind of done this step-by-step process, you've already created your messaging, you've already got your exhibit information put together. You've identified all the ways that you can recognize sponsor on the site and in your communication channels. Okay. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to start developing your sponsorship package. And you're going to start putting together different ways to recognize companies. And don't forget that, like, one of the funnest and coolest things that I ever did for a corporate sponsor was I did a Facebook Live with them from the floor. It became so popular that we were offering Facebook Lives for $5,000 sponsorship, and people loved it because they were able in like a minute reach our 250,000 followers at that time. Now, it might be important for that company to have a Facebook Live for you. I don't know. But don't forget about to recognize your sponsors in social media, because when other companies see that, they get jealous and they'll want to sponsor too. You want to create sponsor envy, definitely. And that, I mean, that is the whole goal of this, is to create people, companies to go attend your event and they see how well you treat your sponsors. They want to be a sponsor. True. But remember, I could get a parking sponsor. I could get a sit and rest sponsor. You can have a reception sponsor. You can have a title exhibit sponsor. All those things, you identify how you want to sponsor, and then you're going to put it together. Next slide, Nick. And I think we're going in. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you right now that you can Google sponsorship package and or sponsorships information or sponsorship information. Just Google that and you'll see so many nonprofits and so many good sponsorship packages out there. I'm showing you this one. This is the VFW one because it's online and it's a public document that you can Google and download and look at. But it's a PDF, and I created this document several years ago. And what's the first thing on the sponsorship package? The VFW National Convention is a huge event with about 10,000 attendees. So it was a different playing field than what you're going to be dealing with. Hopefully, I hope none of you ever have to deal with that. Go ahead and scroll through it slowly, will you, Nick? Go to the next page. So exhibitor information. We basically what we listed for the sponsors is when is the event? What are the details for the event? Most of your sponsors are going to want to know dates, times. They're going to want to know, can we have a table there? Are you going to let them have a table there? That's something you got to ask yourself. That's something you're going to offer the sponsor. But date, time, and then points of contact for the event. Next slide. Next page there. Okay, this is a little overview of the event. Talk about what it is. Next page. And then what we did at the VFW is we created different sponsorship levels. You can go in and read them what they had, but our premier sponsors basically got speaking time on the stage to speak in front of everybody. They got top sign placement. So I want you to look at that and look at these different sponsorship packages, because honestly, where I got a lot of ideas for that was doing a lot of internet searches and looking at other people's materials and seeing what worked and what didn't. And then also interacting and getting feedback. Next page, Nick. Next page. And next page. And then right here, what you have is these were little one-offs that we could get sponsored, like sitting areas. We had different receptions that could get sponsored, things like that. And we just kind of listed them separate. Next. And then we did this, if somebody was sponsoring, we had a magazine that we put ads in, so we had to give them the technical information to put the advertising in. If you're going to recognize your sponsor on the website, what you're going to need from them, and this is important, is their logos, and then if they have brand guidance or logo placement guidance. The last thing you want to do is mess up the placement of a sponsor logo. Next one, Nick. And then finally, we put information about the organization. And now, this is a very, 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 I would say, on the extreme side of a sponsorship package. However, it has all the information that you want. And you could do, like, if I did voices and votes and built a sponsorship package, I literally would just build a one page where I list an Excel file. If you are a premier sponsor, this is what you get. Same thing with the other different levels, and put what the costs are. Uh, the pricing on sponsorships, I leave that up to you. If you've been fundraising in your community, you should have a good feel for what the price are that sponsors can go. At the VFW convention, we operated in sponsorships from $100,000 and below. Most local sponsorships that I've worked with now are $5,000 and below. So they're just different. The packages and the sponsorships differ in size, but the information that you put in the package will be the same because most of the sponsors are going to want to know that. Next slide. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So we built our communications plan. We built our community engagement plan, and we've got our sponsorship package together. One thing that I always suggest is that if you make a big sponsorship package, great. But when you're pitching, I basically I make just a one pager to send in the email. You don't want a big attachment in the initial email reach out if you're cold call pitching, because some servers will strip out a large attachment when you send an email. So I always recommend a very simple one page overview that says, for information, reply to the email. But I'm going to talk about some generalities in pitching now for you. The first thing that I'll tell you is be yourself always. Because when you're talking to an organization, most of you are sitting there because you believe in what you're doing. You have a passion for it, and you love the work that you do. So just let that naturally come out when you're talking to someone about what the event is. So I always tell everybody to be yourself and just be nice, be kind. It's easy to do. But the hardest part about pitching is asking. So practice it. Practice with different people. How many of you have a person at work you don't get along with that well? Practice with them the most. I always like to practice with people that challenge me. And I'll even go into some practices. We'll even do scenarios where we write out like something silly like, hey, say no, but your answer said this, just to steer the conversation differently. Practice makes perfect. I believe pitching is best done face-to-face. Email is cold and impersonal, and emails are easy to say no, and emails are easy to ignore. When you're standing face-to-face someone, you have better chances for success. That's why there's still door-to-door salesmen. Even with Amazon today, there's still door-to-door salesmen because face-to-face still works. Plus, when I sit with people, I read their physical cues quite a bit. So I learn more by sitting across from someone. And then when it comes down to it, the next level I prefer is phone over email. When I was at the Veterans of Foreign Wars and I was cold calling companies that were local in the area, I would walk through the door and introduce myself. And sometimes I could get a lot of information just talking by the receptions and just by being kind and asking, just general questions. So I always brought a sponsorship package with me, or I attached the one pager in the initial communications. So remember that this is, I always called sponsorships hostage negotiations, because sponsors for the VFW, whenever they would sponsor us, or even at Tinker Federal Credit Union, when I was sponsored, I always found out I had the sponsorship level was great, but they always wanted to change one little thing, or they wanted, hey, can we get an extra thing on social media or recognition? Sometimes we could throw it in, sometimes we couldn't. What I found at the VFW is everybody wanted a chance to speak on the stage, but we only reserved that for the $100,000 level. So you're going to find things that are really going to attract your sponsors. So can you have multiple sponsors for one thing? I don't know. It's up to you and your leadership to decide how you want to do it and how you want to recognize. So when you're sitting in front of someone, be receptive to ideas. They're gonna throw some ideas at you. Be receptive, and if it's something that you think your organization can do, bring it to your leadership and get approval. I think a lot of people forget when they're in meetings with companies to actually ask. Tell them while you're there, hey, I'm excited to tell you we've got this great exhibit coming up and we're looking for sponsors for it. And it's an opportunity to get in front of so-and-so people in the community. This is when you use your numbers and your data to support what you're doing. You just talk about the numbers of people that are going to come to the exhibit, the number of people that their logo might be able to reach. You're appealing to the business side. On November 1st, I think that's November 1st, I'm going to be doing a very in-depth class on just corporate relations, and cold calling and pitching are huge parts of that. So if you attend that class, I'm going to go even more in depth. I will tell you that you're actually looking at one person that actually read, there's a few books out there that I'll tell you in my next class that can help you develop your pitch strategies and your communications to make people more receptive to what you're saying. I work for cold calling suggestions. If you're reaching out to a company, I'm going to give you a few principles and rules to go by. Rule number one is always remember similarity. So when I would reach out to organizations, I would target a Marine because I was in the Marine Corps. I would look for a Marine and in an executive position or in marketing in that company. I would try to reach out to them. If I couldn't find that, I would look for somebody else that had similarities to me or were connected to some of the things that I liked on LinkedIn. If I couldn't get that, then what I would do is I would go on LinkedIn, I would look at the company profile, and I'd look at people that were on there to see if there were any that I were connected to or indirectly connected to. If I was directly connected to someone, I would just message them and reach out to them and then ask for an introduction. And when you're reaching out, know that, I'll talk about this later, a second. The other cold calling suggestion I have, other than similarity, is look for people in the organization that work in marketing or in philanthropy or corporate giving. The reason why is marketing personnel and a lot of companies and organizations are usually the ones that handle incoming messages. So you might as well skip college and go straight to the marketers and reach out to them. I filled out contact forms for companies before. I've had success with that. But you have to be very specific and get right to the point very fast. The cold call contact form on the companies is hit and miss. Some companies will call you back in a day. Some you'll never hear from. So understand that. But if you're going to do it on email, I always tell everybody, look at LinkedIn, look for marketing, look for operations. And when you reach out, be very direct. Say, my name is Kevin Jamison. I'm with Honoring America's Warriors. We're having a Voice of the Voice event, and we're looking for corporate sponsors. And then you can include the one pager. Or one of the things that we used to do at the VFW is we used to put a fake website up that sponsors could go to and find out all the information that we didn't put in the package. And it was also a place where they could, we had a little thing set up where they could do a direct contact form that went right to myself and my work counterparts so that we can answer any questions for sponsors right away. But the using the event as an icebreaker to create new relationships, I can't stress that enough, is events are a great way to meet new companies. Next slide, please. So now that we've got our communications, our community engagement plan, we've got our sponsorship package ready, you're going to go out in the community, you're going to be engaging people, you're going to be tracking communications and tracking your donors and following up. I tell everybody in the beginning, work your sponsors hard and then start working your regular donors that you normally work for your organization. The reason why I tell everybody to start your sponsorships first is because usually you're going to have your first round of communications goes out, and then it's going to be a lot of follow-up and negotiating. That's why I always put sponsorship first. And then I go to donor communications, and then I go to attendee communications. But execute your community engagement and your communications plans and follow up online, follow up on messages, exploit every lead. When you get business cards when you speak in front of a Rotary, they'll have lunches. Invite them to your organization. Be proud of what you do. For companies that usually support and sponsor things in communities, look at your banks and your big local businesses that sponsor other events. If you don't have a place, if you don't even know where to start on anything, I always tell people, go look at other organizations in your community and who they get to sponsor. And if you haven't networked with their development person, go network with them and get to know them. Maybe you can learn something from them. I learned a lot from a lot of my folks. The bottom line is, if you're sitting in your office and you're looking around and you are wondering why we're not getting any fundraising, it's because you're not active. Get out in that community, be kinetic. It's hard. Fundraising is hard work. It's challenging, and it's about 95% no's. But those yeses make it worth it because you're able to do good, and the funds that you raise go to help people in your community. And you believe in your mission, you believe what you're doing. So I hope you have that success. Another note is I have done sponsorships. Some companies that I've worked with wanted sponsorships done by contract. Some companies may want to, some may not. What I found is large companies, and the larger the company and the larger the donation, sometimes the larger the obstacles to make it happen. So it's not very difficult to do. Just focus on the terms of the agreement, what you are agreeing to do for them, what they're agreeing to do for you. And then the biggest thing is, if you do have a contract, and this is important to remember, and you say you're going to put a logo somewhere and it's in that contract, if you don't put that logo up, it's a breach of contract. And we call those deliverables. What I used to do is we used to make a contract, but we make a list of the deliverables. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. So on the day of the event, we're getting ready to prepare for the event. You want to ensure that your sponsor recognition and your donor recognition is in place. However you planned it, make sure it's ready. You want to make sure that you post on social media about the event and all that's going well. You want to ensure that your sponsor logos are presented properly, and you want to make sure your sponsors know everything. Parking, roll out the red carpet for them. Say, hey, make sure and meet them there. I met all my sponsors and walked them to their booth at the VFW convention. So encourage your sponsors to wear clothing with their logos to the event for recognition, and ensure all donor recognition is in place. Can't say it enough. And I'll just tell you a pet peeve of mine, and talk to your leaders. I hate it when leaders say, I'd like to thank our sponsors. It's lazy writing. You just recognized a $500 sponsor just in the same breath as a $5,000 sponsor. Take the time to list those sponsors out and say them. And if you're an executive and you're on this call, take the time to learn the names of every sponsor, because that's the best thing you can do to support your development director. So when you're preparing the next slide, Nick. On the day of the event, you want to do a walkthrough and make sure everything is perfect. It looks like it's supposed to look, and everything is where it's supposed to be. Take plenty of pictures for community engagement. Get those sponsors interacting with the exhibit. Get those sponsors interacting with people. Make sure their logo's in a great light. Get pictures of lines. Lines are great. Sponsors love lines. Get pictures of lines by signs. If you are gathering attendee data and you can share that with your sponsor, your organization does that, great. If you don't. Just sometimes numbers is enough. If you have the number of attendees for an event, because that's all exposure for your sponsors. But while you're there, keep your eyes open. Are there any companies? Do you see anybody walking through with company logos on their shirts? Do you see any schools coming through or any major groups coming through that are attendees that a sponsor may want to reach? Make notes for that for next year. That was the biggest challenge, is using that event and really learning those lessons about what you can do better, what you can tighten up, and also look at what sponsorship signs people are paying attention to the most and where you're putting it. And ensure your executives recognize, acknowledge, and interact with their sponsors. As an executive, it's the best thing you can do to make sure that you're getting more sponsorships. Next slide. On the day of the event, you do your walkthrough. Oh, sorry. I was looking at the wrong slide. Finally, everybody knows about follow-up, sending a thank you for your sponsorship. What we used to do at the DFW and a couple of places that I've been, and I make all my development directors do it now, is when we send a thank you, we include pictures of their activations, pictures of all their logos, and pictures of their executives to use on social media. Why? Because it lifts you up too. So we try to use our sponsorships as a way to interact. So that's a good follow-up. But follow through is something completely different. Follow through is having a conversation about what we can do next time, what we can do better together next time. What did you like about this event? What did you not like? And then taking all of that and actually doing something with it. Don't pay lip service to it. And if you made a mistake, don't make it the next year. That's the big challenge. Because when you repeat mistakes, it's a sign that the companies will pay attention. And believe me, companies care. They care about where their logo is placed. They care about how they're treated on site. A lot of times, next slide, Nick. A lot of times, organizations, they care about the event. They care about what they're doing. They care about the community. They care about how they look. So roll out the red carpet, treat them well, and they will care about your organization, and you should be able to grow your relationship from there. Okay, so that's it. I imagine are there any questions right now? Yeah, you'll definitely be able to get a copy of this deck. You can email me at my email address. I'll send it to you if Nick doesn't send it to you. Tips for people resistant to sell: attend my next class on November 1st. My corporate relation class is going to go in tips. I'll tell you right now, the book that you can read is called Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini, Cialdini. It's a book about, he went undercover with a bunch of sales jobs for like 3 years. And what he studied was their sales techniques and why they worked and the psychology behind them. So, somebody just finished it. It's a great book. It's something that it has followed me my whole fundraising career. I've used that. Well, okay, so the question is, when you're cold calling, how do you determine how much to ask for? How do you know if they could do 500 or 50,000? Well, one is you do your homework on companies. I talk about this in the corporate relations class, is you basically do your research on the company, look at what they've given or sponsored. If you can't find anything, then use your sponsorship package you developed and ask them what they think they could come in at. What do they normally sponsor? I've learned that what they normally sponsor from a phone call most of the time, just by calling somebody or talking to the receptionist. Do they sponsor? I generally ask, hey, do you normally sponsor events in the community? Sometimes they'll tell you. And I've asked the amount too. I'm not shy at all. How to get business to feel more comfortable sponsoring a pride event without backlash. I would say that's a selection. It's a very challenging it's a challenge and a pride event, especially with the politics today. I think what I would do is I would look at the businesses that I'm targeting, or I would look at businesses that may have sponsored other pride events. The only way that you're going to get a business to feel more comfortable about sponsoring a pride event without backlash is probably getting them comfortable with your organization and what you do. And if there's a lot of questions there, Nick Hackworth, that asked me that, the business leaders. Nick Hackworth, if you can send me an email about that, I want to send you some more information on that. I think that's an important question that deserves a well thought out answer. So I don't want to just give it to you off the fly here, Nick, because that is a challenge that you have. And I've faced that challenge before, and I want to give you some good advice with that. The author, I'm going to type that in there right now. But the bottom line, if you are, some of you are in rural and remote locations, so you're kind of limited to the businesses that you can go through, and that's a significant challenge. If that's the case, there are, I wish I could give this advice. That's when I would engage groups and private donors. But I appreciate everyone just listening to me. I told Nick, like, yeah, you're trying to set me up for you're here teaching a fundraising class to a bunch of development people.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kevin, for presenting today, and thank you to all our attendees for joining us. Please keep an eye out for an email from me at Missouri Humanities with a link to our survey, the webinar recording, and the slideshow that Kevin used. Next month's virtual capacity building workshop, like Kevin said, will be on corporate relations. That actual date is actually Tuesday, November 5th. Again, it will be at 2 p.m. Since you already registered for today's event, you're registered for all the following workshop sessions that we'll have. If no one else has any questions, I hope you all have a good rest of the day. And Kevin, we'll see you next month.
Yeah, and for the people asking some of these extra questions, like Alicia, about how you determine which fundraising app to use, shoot me an email, and I'll reply and send you some quick advice. Not a problem at all.
Awesome. All right, Kevin. Thanks a lot again.
Thanks, sir. Have a great day, everyone.